Final Fantasy IX is a culmination of over a decade of Final Fantasies, and in my opinion, it's the last truly classical Final Fantasy game. Since the formula significantly changed from Final Fantasy X and forward from there, it had the themes that made me fall in love with the genre, the fantastical whimsy of it, an incredible cast of characters, solid combat system, bit slow at times, but of course a little bit of romance, so in any game similar to Final Fantasy IX, we'll be looking for those same themes, which is why we'll start with the series that has been there the whole time with Final Fantasy and one of its best games. Dragon Quest V is arguably the best game in the series, and it has everything we'd want from a game like Final Fantasy IX. What makes Dragon Quest V unique is the generational story that takes you through the entire life of the main character, or at least 30 or so years of his life. You'll experience everything from that life: marriage, children, fighting all sorts of monsters, and even getting those monsters to join your party. There are multiple different versions of the game to choose from, since there's a Super Nintendo version, a PS2 version, and a Nintendo DS version. Most people don't recommend the original Super Nintendo version, so I would choose between the PS2 and DS, though the PS2 version only has a fan translation, so you'll kind of have to figure that out if you choose that. The PS2 version is in full 3D, so there's a pretty big difference between the two. Regardless of how you play, it's an incredible game and has a lot of charm to it that I think fans of Final Fantasy IX will appreciate. Speaking of charm, the rest of this list is just full of it, including the next game, which is Grandia. Grandia is one of the best games from the PS1 era, following the adventure of Justin and Fina as they go on a journey to see what's beyond the end of the world. This massive wall, an entirely new continent of mystery to discover. It's probably the most similar to Final Fantasy IX in a lot of ways, especially in the relationship between the main character, Justin, and Fina, one of the other characters in your party. It has a fantastic romance that blossoms slowly over the course of the story, but I wouldn't just recommend the first game in the series. Grandia 2 is also a fantastic game that carries a lot of the mechanics from the first game and does them even better in some ways. Grandia 2 has a different story that in some ways feels a bit more mature. I think it's really more of a personal preference than anything else, whether one will appeal to you more than the other. But Grandia 2 has more quality of life adjustments that make it a bit easier to play for people more used to modern gaming. But they're both retro JRPGs, so the difference isn't massive. Either way, play both of them in any way that you can. There's been a recent Steam release, but be a bit careful with that because it isn't perfect and doesn't necessarily upgrade it very much from the original. So you can play Grandia 1 on PS1, Grandia 2 on PS2, or you can do the HD versions on Steam. Breath of Fire 3 is another great game from the same era of gaming as Final Fantasy IX, and it has you follow the steps of Ryu, as every Breath of Fire game does. It has a great cast of characters and is full of that classic JRPG charm, and it has fishing, so you can't really go wrong with that. Part of what makes Breath of Fire 3 stand out is the master system. You choose a master for your characters, and that'll change the abilities that they get and the stats they receive. And obviously, Ryu also turns into a dragon, but this time you choose between 3 different dragon genes that turn you into various dragons based on your choice. So there's some really interesting systems there. It's full of cool systems. It has a great story too. So there's a little bit of something for every kind of player there. Highly recommended for any JRPG fan, especially those fond of Final Fantasy IX. Lunar, Silver Star Story is one of the JRPGs with the biggest heart. It has a fantastically paced and classic story with characters that you'll quickly grow to love, and the way that the relationship between Alex and Luna goes over time is super well done, and honestly, I'd say that of most of the cast. That's one thing that both Lunar games are top tier at, and that's why I would recommend both Lunar Silver Star Story and Eternal Blue to fans of Final Fantasy IX. It has great set pieces, and it has charm and whimsy, the kind that you'd expect from a game similar to Final Fantasy IX, and it's just a great time all around. It got a lot easier to recommend because both of the games now have an HD remaster and they come together, so you only have to pay for one. That makes it a lot easier to play them. So, I did want to guide you into a bit of a more obscure side of JRPGs here, at least in North America, and that's why the next game is Popo Croy Monogatari for the PS1, not to be confused with Popo Croy for the PSP, which is a mashup of the two Popo Croy Monogatari games. That's important because the PS1 games are now fully fan-translated, and have a ton more content in them than there was in the American release. Popo Croy Monogatari goes fully into the fairy tale style in a similar way to Ni no Kuni, but beneath the surface, it isn't all fun and games, has a surprising amount of depth and even a romance that plays out over the course of the two games, not to mention that it's unique and beautiful. It has this great art style that is very eye-catching, similar in that way to the work of Akira Toriyama. I think it's heavily underrated due to us not having the full versions of the first two games for the PS1. It can be a bit difficult as well, so be a bit careful, but if you enjoy a challenge, you'll definitely like Popo Croy Monogatari. It's not overly difficult though, so you'll have to find a way to play the fan-translated PS1 versions, as there's no official English translation for them. I'd also like to give an honorable mention here to Lost Odyssey. I think that it fits pretty well with the other games on the list, and is also a bit underrated, though, there's a lot of people that really love it. It's still not that well known. The only reason I wouldn't necessarily fully recommend it is because the tone is quite different from Final Fantasy IX, but if you're interested in what some describe as the next evolution of classic Final Fantasy, you might want to give Lost Odyssey a try. So, there you go. There's a good amount of games to get you started in your search for games like Final Fantasy IX. I think that's a good variety to choose from here, and I'm sure that there are plenty more that could fit the bill, but these are some great ones to get you started. Feel free to let me know if you think there are any other games like Final Fantasy IX you think people should check out in the comments. Thanks for watching.